Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Let's be real, leading a business is lonely. When the big decisions land on your desk, who do you actually talk to? That's where GrowX Labs comes in. Their executive decision support gives founders and execs direct access to a strategic sounding board. Someone who's been in the trenches and knows how to cut through the noise. Whether it's team tension, high stakes moves, or just needing to talk it out, GrowX helps you move forward with clarity and confidence. Head to growxlabs.com/mark. That's GRWX labs.com/mark and book your discovery call. So those of you who have been listening to Mark My Words for the past several years, you hopefully know by now that I aim to bring a plethora, an array of different entrepreneurs and journeys and stories, and I really, there's kind of like a theme where you bring somebody on, and we all, as I've stated so many times, we all, as entrepreneurs, kind of have like similar traits, no matter where we're from, whether it's Jason Clark, who is from Louisville, or, you name it, my friends from Utah and Australia, all across the world. I mean, it just seems like we're all very similar in certain ways, and there hopefully is a uniqueness to every story, but there are certain themes that are similar. We're driven in a certain way to work for ourselves, to build ourselves up, etc., etc. And I feel, at least from my perspective, the the golden dream of it all is to, you ride off into the sunset, you're running your company, you have like full autonomy, etc. But there are other dreams and other ways of, building yourself and remaking yourself. And I feel like, Jason can certainly correct me on all these things that I'm trying to set up here. But Jason Clark has a really interesting story because he is the former owner of Via Studio, but it has consolidated with a company called Tectonic, where he is now the CMO of, which stands for Chief Marketing Officer, for those of you not aware of what a CMO is. Um, so he's worked for over 20 years helping organizations to bring structure to their branding, marketing, and digital ecosystems. He's worked with clients from across the spectrum, Fortune 5, Fortune 50 corporations to large nonprofits. Uh, he has, if you go to the Via Studios website, especially, that really gives you a good introduction. There's a nice little reel that you can even watch of the work that his team has done over the years. Very cool work. And as somebody who has a degree in like electronic media, television production, certainly, I'm very envious of the awesome clean work that him and his team has done. He's him and his team strive to help medium to large size organizations, small businesses, or funded startups, nonprofit organizations. I'm going to give Jason a chance to say hello. You're listening to Mark My Words. I never introduced myself. I'm Mark Schmidt, the host of Mark My Words, and today Jason Clark is here. Welcome, Jason. How you doing today?
Hello, Mark. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thanks for having me. And what a great introduction. Yeah. Always a little bit weird to hear that from someone else. I feel
I'm
old.
sure. Well, it takes a lot of meditation to pull off an intro like that. And that's like the one thing, as I told you before we hit record, I always put so much on myself rather than just doing all this a different way. But, something, it keeps me on my toes and it helps me to do the proper research to hopefully make this a effective and fun experience for all. So, yeah, that's that's how we do things on that's how we do things on Mark My Words. So, w-
Fantastic. All right.
well, welcome to the big show. And as you were informed of, I know you've listened to some episodes. We're going to kick this right off, going in the DeLorean of careers and, the Wayback Machine for those of us who were on the internet years ago. I guess they still have the Wayback site somewhere, but I digress. I I really am interested in, first of all, learning more about what drew you to graphic design, because I feel like back in like the late 80s, early 90s, I feel like graphic design was really starting to like evolve a bit. And I
Oh, yeah.
just think, and you right jumping right in. All right, I'm gonna give you a chance to just talk about why
Sure.
you were drawn to that. Were you always like into computers
The
and
origin
just,
story. Yeah,
yeah, let's
sure.
do it. Go for it.
So I I had no idea what graphic arts was when I was in high school, and I was probably too smart and too cocky for my own good. I was a little bit of a misfit in high school, and I was the weird kid that, like, I had the heavy metal hair in the 80s, but I also made straight A's. Like, all of my friends were stoners and, played guitar in bands and stuff. And I like, I loved being the odd man out as far as, not failing out of school and like being proud of my grades, but still being a weirdo and, being playing in bands and goofing off with music. So I used to go into my sophomore year of high school, I used to go in early to my psychology class and I would draw heavy metal logos on the chalkboard. And my psychology teacher told me I should get into graphic arts and had no idea what that was. I was lucky enough to live at a time when our public school system had vocational schools for things like metal shop and like being a car mechanic. So back then, the graphic arts was kind of in line with the trades like that. So it was running a printing press, working in a camera room. Layout was not on computers yet. It was on a light table with a X-Acto knife and Rubylith and that type of thing. So I got an early start, kind of pre-Macintosh, in high school, and it was really fun. Let me tell you, I fell in love with it immediately. Learned how to run a printing press, which barely exists anymore. And because I was at the top of that class, again, a nerd, I was able to, the senior year in that program, the person at the top of the class had the opportunity to do a co-op position at a private university in town. So my senior year of high school, I actually left after lunch and went to the print shop at this university and worked for 5 or 6 hours instead of going to class. And so yeah, this is all I've done since high school is graphic arts, marketing, and all the things that are encompassed there.
I love that you were like a cool nerd because I know for me, I was like a nerd without the grades, and I mean I could fine, maybe with the
Yeah,
exception of math, but I can kind of like relate to, I think for as much as I wanted to like fit in and be a part of like a group or some kind of niche
yeah,
somewhere in school, I think I'm almost kind of happy that that never happened because I don't think that I would be the person that I am today. And it
right,
just seems
right.
like most of the people who wind up becoming entrepreneurs or doing something like you and I and so many of the others who've been on this show have wound up doing, they're always kind of like a little off on the side, like maybe a little more independent thinking and finding their way, like kind of without the influence or impact of too many
Oh yeah,
others.
we're
So,
all yeah, we're all a little extra in our own way.
yeah.
It's like a Marvel superheroes. They all have superpowers, but they're all extremely different in how they are expressed. So yeah, I don't know anybody that lives in a world like we do that isn't that may have had like a hard time in high school or earlier in life, but it made them who they are, and they're proud of that now, which is great.
Yeah, it's one thing that I've really learned, and I think one of the reasons I'm still doing this show 6 years later is because of meeting people like you who I'm like, yeah, this is like finally like a place where I feel a little bit at home, even though it's not like I see everybody like at all. It's a lot of these episodes, it's like a one shot thing, and then, there's that bond and connection, but it's not like we're all one, we're like kind of like a group of, just it's kind of hard to explain, but I think you understand what I'm saying, though.
Oh
That
yeah. Well, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, you've made a choice in life to take a tougher road,
yeah,
and we can all empathize with each other to know that we've taken risks. We've won some, we've probably lost more than we've won, but there's just a different attitude when you're an entrepreneur and a small business person versus kind of playing the safe road. I'll tell you, when the last official job that I ever had working at a bigger ad agency, my mom just couldn't understand why I quit that job. And she told me about a week after I quit, she called me up and she's like, Jason, I've been thinking about you, and I don't think it's too late to call them and beg for your job back. And like, she just didn't have the perspective of, and kind of where I was and like inside my head. And I just, I love you, mom, but I'm choosing a different path, and I'm sorry.
no, I totally relate to that. I had one parent who was very, very, very good with numbers, like ridiculously good. And I had siblings who were like good with numbers and definitely a bit more business minded in that way. I was not. I struggled mightily. I mean, I was a senior in high school taking applied math, and I knew growing up that I had like a real passion for television. I was kind of like a weird kid who like would look at TV guys, like I would love getting like a new one and just studying how they would like schedule
Yeah.
shows. This is me at like 6, 7 years old, and I would like love taking TVs apart. I knew pretty early I had like a huge passion for it, but I kept like just having that message in my mind, like you should, you know, get into computers, you should do something that, just my one of my parents, I pretty much quote them as saying, Mark, why don't you just get a fucking business degree? And just that was basically their
Yeah, sure.
attitude about
Use that curiosity.
yeah, because I had a very, I wanted to do something unconventional. And, it's not that I had a deep desire to be unconventional. It was just that's where my passion was. And it took a lot of soul searching and finally just putting my foot down and saying, you know what? I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to wind up in and out of like 50 billion jobs in factories and apprenticeships for electrician, plumber, and I'm just gonna keep
Right.
all this stuff rather than the thing I'm passionate about. And
That's great.
that's when I put my foot down and I just went for it. And it sounds like you did something similar where you just said, you know what, this is where my passion is.
Yeah, it's I mean, if you've got the motivation and curiosity, you should and you want to do it, you should absolutely give it a try. There's more people that want you to succeed than not.
And what was it like early on, especially being a little more of what I view as like a resourceful, a little more independent, uh, just autonomous person? You're going into uh, corporate America. What was that experience like? Did you like uh, being, I guess, like following somebody else, like having a boss? Did that bother you? What ultimately
Um
kind of just was the deal breaker?
uh Back then in our industry, you were expected to live your job. It was fairly common for everyone in the ad industry in the late 90s, early 2000s to work 12-hour days easily, right? Like the prevailing rule was like you get there before your boss and you leave after your boss leaves. And that was for a while when you're young, I think that might be a good way to kind of reset your work ethic and understand that hard work pays off. But after a while, you realize that you are actually being taken advantage of. So when I had that realization, it was like they're billing my time at $150 an hour. I'm getting paid maybe $20 an hour, if not less. Like there's got to be a place for me in that void between what I'm making now and what they're charging the client. So I owe it to myself to give that a shot.
And there's a big part of me, especially working in the field that I've been in, I can definitely relate because I know just especially in my field, there's a lot of really amazing jobs out there. I personally have like an amazing, arguably the best corporate job I've had, but one thing I can relate to, sorta, is that my work, even though I don't actually create ads or anything like that, I do like work on them and we get like oodles of ads in like all the time. So I wind up
Yeah.
working pretty hard. Just that whole industry, I feel like, is an industry that's like you gotta work. I guess anything like creative, they squeeze as much as they can out of
Well,
their staff.
yeah, the older you get, you realize there's a difference between labor and value. You're either selling your time or you're selling your expertise. And when you realize that you have expertise, you are able to decouple from selling your time and labor. And I think that is, I honestly, I wish that was something that was taught in the high schools, alongside something like critical thinking, is to understand that, you know, you can, and even with, some of the trades or some of the non-white collar work, I have friends who are electricians that work for a big shop and make, you know, uh, not a great salary, and then they realize, they're selling the same thing that I can sell on my own, and I can make more money doing that just as a independent contractor. And again, that's that breakaway from selling your time and your labor versus selling your value. And again, like I wish that was higher up in the conversation when people, start to get frustrated with where they are in life, or how they can improve their lot in life. Especially, I've got a son who's 18 now, and everybody's worried that the AI is going to take everyone's jobs. But so, like, find value, find a place you can be valuable instead of finding a place you can make an hourly wage.
Oh, that is totally true. And I know, especially somebody like me, even though I'm doing stuff like this on the side and whatever, I also really value what I do during the day, like my main job. I mean, I worked really hard to get to this point, but I know I have to keep working and keep just, trying to build up my value and skill
Mm-hmm.
set.
Yep.
And that applies to your day job. It also applies to your business. And somehow I'm going to segue that conversation into talking about you stepping out. You're talking to your mom on the phone and you're like, this is what I'm doing. You go off and you do via studio, especially back like 23 years ago. World was I don't want to say a very different place. It was a pretty different place,
It's
especially
pretty
for,
different. Yeah.
yeah, especially for starting up a business. So, what was that like back then, starting up a business? And it looks like along the way you started a few others. So, you kind of got the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial
Well,
bug.
right. I think there was a parallel between my passion for music and my professional passion, and I actually learned more small business fundamentals in the music industry. I'll put industry lightly, just playing in bands, later on getting into DJ and the rave scene and that kind of stuff. We used to put on our own shows. So there's a little micro budget for a show. How much are you paying people to play? How much are you renting out a venue for? Like renting a sound system, teamwork, putting a team together to put on a show, and that type of thing. And I learned that, in my early to late 20s, before I even tried to step out into like what I would, I didn't even know I was preparing myself for small business life when I was doing that. So that was probably the initial piece. And then, so when it came to booting up an LLC or starting a small business, it made that part easier. As far as the industry itself, I feel like, I was able to ride the digital wave from, I got on my surfboard, and, websites, e-commerce, digital marketing, branding was more important. Apple did a great job helping people understand how important brand was. And, for those 25 years after that, the tide was rising in that industry. And it might be not rising so much anymore, with some of these new technologies that are coming out. But I got really lucky. The timing was good. I picked the right career. I was able to kind of forge a path that made me happy.
I was just going to ask about the changes that technology has caused because for all of the great work that people like you can do and do. And I still personally, when it comes to so many things in the world, I still think the human touch is something that
Oh
needs to
yeah.
be incorporated somewhere. It's kind of like, uh, I know I start hearing a lot about AI podcasts that I guess some people are trying to do. Yeah, you're. No,
Sounds terrible. Who wants to
well,
listen to that?
it's one of those things where I've never tried it, but I think that it could be good, but a person still needs to be involved. Otherwise,
Yes.
you're running the risk of having bad information, wrong information, maybe a bad, unexpressive voiceover. There's so many things that can like go wrong with that. And I feel like the same thing can be said for uh, creating like logos and art because I will admit I goof off with the chat GPT quite a bit. Sometimes it's for real purposes, sometimes it's just I'm goofing off, I get a little
Yeah.
silly.
Let's see what
I
weirdness can come out of here. Yeah.
For example, I've come up with the idea of merging. I have this whole long running thing on one of my chats that combines Back to the Future and Little House on the Prairie. And I I don't know how that resonates with people, but I have gotten all kinds of like really interesting like artwork for it that I've asked them to just generate and whatnot. But I've also gotten a lot of things that are like it just really makes me scratch my head. And I know I've asked it to do some things for me professionally that I'm like, okay, maybe I need to put a little more human thought into it. And I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
that's where people like you are still very much needed. And, I think people get the wrong idea about AI where they're expecting too much from it. But I think people are also not putting enough of themselves like into it to
Oh yeah.
collaborate
Sure.
and to make their work uh better.
Yeah. The only counterpoint to that is very small business.
Yep.
Um, I think that some of these tools are doing a really good job helping them propel from nothing into a little bit. Like we have an entire dev team that builds web applications, and it is still impossible to build a vibe coded app that is data secure, that protects PII, that you can put on a server next to a SOC 2 compliant piece of software and feel comfortable that it's there. Now, a small business that doesn't need all that, absolutely go for it. Like the thing, and we've actually going to put this in our next email newsletter, right? Like the thing that you may have asked for 2 years ago that was too expensive for us to build might be cheap enough for us to build it for you now because of vibe coding. Like we're willing to give that a shot. We've built some in house that help us. But yeah, the things that require true innovation or creativity, LLMs are good aggregators of stuff, words, images, and whatnot. It's not going to produce or pull out anything new. It's not that they're not built for new and innovative. So you can use it to help shape ideas or categories or put some structure onto a thought process, but you're not going to get anything completely new out of it. And that's one of the when you're offering branding and marketing services, if you ask it for a marketing strategy, it's going to give you the most average marketing strategy because it's averaging out everything that it knows to provide that answer. So yes, maybe one day it will take our jobs, but honestly, I feel there's going to be a little bit of a gold rush with that continues with people that understand the digital world to help make sense of these tools that we have now. There's not, I've talked to some CEOs and to some clients of ours where they've discovered Claude Code and they go build this web app that works and they've never coded anything and they're so excited. But that person that does that doesn't want to be in front of a prompt window for their whole career. That person's already making too much money and has too much time. They're going to get sick of it. So those tools still need to be put into a place where a real human can add value to what it's generating. I'm ranting at this point, but I've thought a lot about this recently.
No, I've thought about it too because I certainly don't want to talk about what's going on at like the office, my day job, but one thing I am going to say is that a long time ago, when I was at another company, we started implementing some AI-ish tools that were supposed to
Mm-hmm.
help. I built at least my daytime career has been like quality control on television, on
Yeah.
shows, on ads, which that's all I do now is do quality control on ads. But um, it was kind of a situation even like 10, 12 years ago where it's like, wow, there's going to come a point where we're not going to be needed to physically review all these things. And I feel like it's a decade plus later, and
Yeah.
we're still kind of like asking a lot of the same questions in this field. So that's not to say that it can't speed up and become something more, but it speaks to just how much people are needed still. And I think in the media, it gets painted a lot like, oh my gosh, people are not going to be needed. We're going to need universal income for everybody, and nobody's going to
We're
have
not there
anything
yet.
to do. Yeah, no, we're not there yet. And I don't want it to be there at least for another like 13, 15 years at least. But
Well, and that's, I came into the publications industry, if you want to call it that. When I got my first job in that print shop, there were more people running printing presses than there were doing anything else. And when I got my second job at the bigger university in town, there was a whole building full of people running printing presses. Those people knew at the beginning of my career that their job was about to be made redundant with digital
yeah,
printing, with Xerox machines, with, four color, like that trade is gone at this point. We've still got screen printers and people doing more artsy kind of projects with those kind of tools. Letterpress is still amazing, but that trade is gone. But it took 20 or 30 years for that to happen. It will happen a
yeah,
little bit faster this time.
yeah,
And, again, like it's your job in this new world to figure out what's next for you. When I was more doing the work than kind of managing the work, I was amazing. I got really good at Flash. If you remember
yep,
Macromedia and Adobe Flash, like animation and action script and, like the scripted animations and that kind of thing. Like I was really good at that. If I had stuck there, I wouldn't have a job anymore. So like you have to, if you want to be in a creative field, you have to ride the wave, figure it out, always be changing and evolving yourself and learning new things and being like, it starts with what we talked about at the beginning, like curiosity and motivation. If you can't stay curious and motivated, like go learn one of the trades, learn how to be a plumber or an electrician. There's plenty of money there. There is no shame in doing a work like that. It is honestly probably going to pay more than the things that we do now. So there's, pick one. It's okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, I tried plumbing many years ago and I failed at it epically. I think the
Yeah.
last job that I did, I was supposed to help carry some real big, like, sink type thing, and somehow it wound up dropping and shattering. And I think it was about at that point I decided I needed to maybe go back to college and do
Yeah.
something else. And
I worked for a roofer for a day in high school and realized that I was afraid of heights and also a wimp. So I'm not going to lug shingles up a ladder to build roofs.
well, let's jump back into something we know you're good at.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about just to tie in everything with AI and just you being the talent that you are, and talk a bit
Sure.
about, um, I have a, what do you want to call it? It's not necessarily a logo. I have a cover. That's the word I'm looking for. I have a cover for this podcast, and it's actually something I need to update. But it's, that's kind of like my branding. It's something that I built, and it's not necessarily a logo, though. I don't even think I tried my hand at making a logo. That's a whole other story
Sure.
there. But uh, talk a little bit, just with all that being said, let's I just am
Yeah.
curious to hear more about what you feel is the difference between like logo and having like a true brand, and how you or your team might explain that to people, especially people like me
Sure.
who keep stumbling over the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the most accurate metaphor for brand and when I so a logo is part of an identity system. So we'll get there in a second. But the difference between brand and your brand identity, this is how I think about it. Your brand, in the terms of a person, a brand is your personality. It is what people emotionally think about you when they think about Marc, right? Like, who is Marc? Marc's a friendly guy. He's, likes to have conversations with new people. He's an entrepreneur, right? Like there's, and there's possibly some, some negative aspects of your personality. I know I've got plenty.
Me never.
Yeah. Your identity is how you express that with the way you cut your hair, the clothes that you wear, your posture and your body language. So, the brand is the more abstract, amorphous part that people actually identify with. And the identity is like, okay, Jason Clark here's got an outdoorsy kind of vest on and, a short haircut and, talks with confidence. I can infer some things about this guy. And that's the identity that it's reflecting your brand. So a logo really is just one component of your identity. So it might be, the shirt that you're wearing when really it's the whole kit and caboodle. It's your body language. It's the way you speak. It's your mannerisms. Which is why an identity system is your logo. It's your colors. It's the fonts that you use, the amount of white space that you use in your design. And so when people pay us, it's rarely we rarely get paid for just a logo. We many times get paid for a brand strategy phase and then an identity phase, where with the brand strategy, we are extrapolating all of the personality of that brand. Forget about what you look like. Forget about what your old logo was. Let's think about who you are, how your audience perceives you, and how you want to be perceived in the market. And we will define all of those first and then try to, again, like we're somebody's stylist after that. We're taking them to the tailor to go pick out fabrics and, the kind of cut to build that identity. So it's a multi-phase process. It's not necessarily required for very small business, brand is a function of marketing. And what I like to say is marketing amplifies value. Marketing doesn't create value. So there is a time, say in the startup world, again, if you're a very small business or even if you're a funded startup, where you have to prove the concept first, prove that you can make some money by doing what you do. Find out what people need and, tune your offering to what people are willing to pay for, and then think about amplifying that through your brand and marketing. So I've ranted again, but again, this is something I've done for decades now, and I'll stand on that.
No, that was a really great way to break that down, because at the end of the day, everything you're saying kind of reflects a little bit, at least, on the thought process of me creating my podcast cover. It was a long time ago, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure going back to the drawing board on that today, it would probably be something a little bit different. And but back
Well, and
then, and
if it's the cover that I'm seeing, if it's the cover that I'm seeing, it's got your headshot on there. It's got a kind of a teal blue background.
yeah,
I get you're saying something with that color and with the fact that you're putting your own face on there. You've started down that road, that journey towards an identity, and that's, if this blew up, right? If you became, top 5 podcast in the world, you'd have to think, do I want this to be all about me? Because right now it is. And sometimes it will, the answer is yes. And sometimes the answer is no. I had to tune our brand away from me a few years ago because it was too much about the Jason show, and I was getting exhausted with that, and it wasn't fair to the rest of my team. So take me out of the storytelling, put the team's work in there. Via Studio is about the work that we have and that we've done and the impact we make. It's not about me. And I probably wouldn't have said that when I started 20 years ago.
I try not to make this about me. I know it's called Mark My Words, but it was just a good name that somebody gave to
Yeah.
me, so I ran with it. But I know
It's a
just
good
as
turn of phrase. You did
yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's catchy. It's something people will hopefully remember. And you're just getting me to kind of think. You made some good points there. I know just as far as the color scheme, that was more so my wife loves that teal color. So that's kind of like a reflection of her minuscule, and I do mean minuscule, involvement. Although as we progress in life, she's getting a little more interested. But that was kind of like a tribute to her. And then just,
Well, that
I,
says something about you and your brand,
yeah,
right? There's
yeah.
loyalty, there's love, there's dedication. Again, it's implied in it, but it's there. People are going to feel that. That's a
And
good
I
thing.
and I also was told not to have a teethy smile, which is why I'm smiling the way that I am. Because they say if you smile and you're showing your teeth, you look like diabolical or something like that. Well, yeah, like that, just that look.
Ha ha
So,
ha.
they, and this
um,
is,
I I would say trust photographers there. A good headshot
yep,
photographer, whether it's teeth or no teeth, smile or no smile, will make you look like you. I've
yep.
got there's 2 or 3 photographers here in town that I trust implicitly. Like, do your magic. I would never, even someone in just barely starting out in life, in professional life, I would tell them to go get a professional headshot. Pay the money.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the many good avenues to take because I know sometimes my wife will be like, why aren't you like smiling? And I was like, well, when
Yeah.
I started this show 6 years ago, all the advice I got was don't smile with your teeth showing because you look evil.
Well, and a good photographer wouldn't tell you anything. They would just start talking to you and taking photos.
Yeah.
And the lighting, the attitude would come out in that session. And that's the real advice that you should be, given. Everybody's got an opinion on how a photo or a logo should look, but really, again, it's in natural interactions. It's all there.
Well, A, that's great advice. And B, one of the reasons that I have been thinking a bit about some of these things, you mentioned when the show is in the top 5%. According to Listen Notes, this show is in the top 5%. I don't think that I rank anywhere on any list or anything, but they
Yeah.
claim, mark my words, is in the top 5%. Now, if they were in the top 1%, that'd be like, whoa. But,
Yeah. There's a big difference in the podcast world there. Yeah.
yeah,
So
but that's just been all the years of just being consistent and the hard
well
work.
done, sir.
And
That's
you get
awesome.
to a point, especially with like your brand and how you're presenting yourself, you're like, okay, it's been a few years. What can we do to better reflect where we're at now? So that's kind of like, long story short, that's kind of where I'm at the moment here in 2025.
Well done,
But
sir. Amazing.
let's, speaking of amazing, and before we go too much time here, I know we're getting a little short, should give you an opportunity to talk about your transition and the consolidation period if
Sure.
you're able to talk about that, because that was one of the
Yeah.
most interesting aspects of your story. So I want to give you a
Oh,
chance
let
to
me
just
tell you.
talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So at the beginning of 2023, we announced that I had sold the company via studio. Um, Technically sold it, but merged it with another company called eResources. And since then, we have rebranded as Tectonic. And so in the agency world, so many owners have their identities wrapped around their business. And so I got when I announced that I had sold the company, I either got two kind of phone calls. The first phone call was, "Are you okay?" And the second phone call was, "Congratulations. I didn't even know you could do that." Um, so that was really funny, honestly. I mean, that lasted for a few months. Um, so at that point, I was exactly at the 20-year mark of owning Via Studio. I was looking for an exit strategy. I didn't want to get too old and not be able to pass the baton of what we had built onto another person or another group, right? I didn't want as I enter my late 50s and early 60s here pretty soon, I didn't want to be tethered to this thing that was reliant on me. If you've been in small business world for that long, there are months and years that will exhaust you. So the other bit was having a new chapter and having a bigger audience. So we went from about 18 employees to now we've got almost 80 employees in the whole company. We've got a nationwide presence. We've got other divisions that we can cross-sell into. We've got, our branding and marketing team hasn't changed. So the clients of this bigger company, we now have opportunities to have conversations with and to sell our services with. So taking a back seat from CEO to being CMO has allowed me to focus on how do we get our message out to more people more often. That's when it's time for me to sail off into the sunset, it's it's on a bigger foundation and a more stable foundation than what I could give it by itself. And yeah, I honestly really proud of landing the plane there. This is year 4 of a 5-year earn-out period for me. And so, at the end of next year, we'll meet with the leadership team and see if I want to keep going or if it's time to kind of let it set sail on its own. And again, honestly, that's exciting. It's amazing that I've been able to achieve that. It's a big milestone with career and family and everything else.
What a great story. I feel like for as much as we all want to build ourselves up, make, have a lot of success. I don't know if I want to throw money in there too much, but money does matter, I guess. But,
it gives
we
you
want,
the ability to make decisions. It's important in that way.
Yeah. And, I think we all want to achieve that. And I think just having you on this show to show just a different angle on success, because you reached a point in your success story where you said, I want to still be a part of this. I want to do what I love, but I'm going to take an approach where I can kind of have a little bit of a different type of role. And I
Yeah.
love that. That's a really
yeah. When I'm a pack animal, I
yeah.
need my team. I need to feel like I'm part of something. And it's not, again, there's probably, in some ways I do need it to be about me, but in, the long term, like it's about my family. It's about being able to support them. It's being able to have a little bit more autonomy in life now. Again, like before the show, we talked, like we're planning on being digital nomads next year. So I will be working, but hopefully I'll be working from Peru and France and Croatia.
That's amazing.
And yeah, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was CEO of the company here and was expected, like if our presence was more regional instead of national. So that's, again, it's afforded my family more opportunities.
Well, Jason, I would love to keep talking and going into more about quality of life and all this other stuff, but I feel like you've said, I don't know if I want to say you've said it all, but you've certainly said enough for me to give
It's a
you
good
the
intro
tools.
into my perspective, yeah.
It certainly was. I want to give you the opportunity to just tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you, and anything else you want to add.
Sure. Yeah. You can find the company at teamtectonic.com. Or you can find me. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. And the URL, you can search for Jason Clark Tectonic, or the URL string is the letter C. It stands for Charles Jason Clark. And you'll find me pretty easily. But I love these conversations. I'm happy to talk to anyone that's got needs advice on small business life or branding or mergers and acquisitions, anything that I've had the honor of being a part of, I'm always happy to talk about. I think we all, like you said, again, calling back to earlier in the conversation, we all have to support each other.
Well, I appreciate you for coming on Mark My Words today. This was an amazing conversation, very educational, and I love just what you're doing and the way that you've transitioned here, and what you're about to do next year is incredible. And I wish you continued happiness and balance in life, and continued branding.
Thank you, my friend. Good talking to you. This is fun.
Awesome. Well, this was Jason Clark, and this was Mark My Words. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you soon with another episode. Bye for now. Thank you for for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.